very good afternoon to you and welcome to today's edition of Joy Business Masterclass. Masterclass is powered by Joy Business and brought to us by Goyle. Goyle, good energy, Goyle, Yenara, Yedia. Masterclass comes your way every Wednesday at 1:30 p.m. and runs all the way through to 2:15 p.m. here on your superstation Joy 99.7. My name, as always, is Yaw Barnafo, and I'm glad to be your host for today's edition of Masterclass. Today's show is one of those that comes with mixed feelings because, again, it's the last, should I say, conversation we're going to be having on stakeholder management. We spent the last couple of weeks with Latif Abubakar, who has obliged us some wonderful information and content. But today we sort of bring that conversation to a close, if you like, and if time permits us, we'll go back and do some kind of recap on the things we've talked about in weeks 1, 2, 3, and then today's week 4 conversation. We've been talking about stakeholder management, introducing the conversation, how to identify stakeholders, the world of stakeholders. Today we'll be dwelling a bit more on the area of monitoring and evaluation of stakeholder management, if you like, monitoring and evaluation. And as always, we have some slides which we're going to be streaming live on Facebook, so please do join us so that you can be a part of that conversation. At some point in the show, we will get interactive so that you can also be a part of that conversation. Latif, you're welcome back to this conversation.
Thank you very much, my brother.
Mixed feelings.
I know.
Hopefully sometime in the new year, maybe we'll have the opportunity to have you back on the show again.
Definitely. I would love to.
You've become a friend of the show, if I can call you that.
Yeah, and I accept it.
Because this is not the first time you've been.
No, this is not the first time.
Indeed.
And it won't be the last.
It won't be the last. It won't be the last. Today we're talking about monitoring and evaluation of stakeholder management. Because we'll do a recap on weeks 1 to 3, maybe we'll go straight into today.
Yeah.
And then once we're done with the content, then we can kind of go back and do a quick recap.
Yeah.
Yes?
Okay, so stakeholder monitoring and evaluation, or stakeholder monitoring and controlling. I'll be using those words interchangeably. Even before I proceed, just one important recap. It's stakeholder involvement in projects. I like giving a summary of how to involve stakeholders on projects. And basically, it tells you that for you to be able to involve stakeholders comfortably on projects, one, you need to identify the stakeholders.
Correct.
You need to determine their requirements, that's their needs, wants, and expectations. Then you need to determine their interests, their power, their influence. Remember the stakeholder mapping, where you can get the power, interest, grade.
High power, high influence.
Exactly. Then also, after determining that, you need to also be able to have a communication plan for them. We spoke about the push, pull, interactive. That's the methods of communication, and even the tool or technology you would use to communicate to them.
Right.
It's also very important for you to state. Then now you need to begin executing the communication, because for stakeholders, a lot of experts even tell you that when it comes to stakeholders, we are unable to manage them. We engage them. So it's more about communicating to engage the stakeholders. Then the most important thing, which is the topic we're going to talk about today, is that how you can monitor and evaluate the engagement process. So that's actually the last bit of the flow in terms of if you really want to involve stakeholders, what one should do.
You know, as you talked about the fact that there's a school of thought that says that you don't manage stakeholders but you engage them, it brings me to the question that was asked last week when we got interactive. Okay. There was a caller on the line who asked the question about at what point, I think it was on social media, at what point does the stakeholder identification or inclusion
begins
begin and end. And I think you were clearly emphatic, and you said it ends when the project ends.
Exactly. And then it's the first thing you do when you're given the mandate, and then it ends immediately the project.
And I think you even went on to give the example about a stakeholder whose circumstances changed, and therefore their power, interest, grade
also changed and switched from a low power to a high power. And sometimes it can switch even from a high power. I give an example of a DC.
Exactly.
That the person was a DC then, so he had high power, high interest. And then he lost.
He lost the seat.
And then now
suddenly
he became someone with low power because it's a different person there. So those things, for the power interest grade, it switches and rotates.
Right.
It can easily switch and rotate, not that it compulsorily switches and rotates.
So when you've done all that is required, as we've talked about, how do you then monitor and evaluate or control the project?
We always say that for every project, even in project management, monitoring and evaluation is core. It is a process that I always say happens at every stage on your project or on your work field or whatever you're doing. Monitoring and control cuts across. There is a a single phrase that I usually use when it comes to monitoring and controlling, and it's categorized into 3: look, check, and fix.
Okay.
Look, check, and fix. So you look out for potential problems, check if they are problems, indeed problems, and then you fix them. If they are not problems, then you move. So look, check, and fix is actually the entire summary of what monitoring and evaluation or monitoring and controlling means.
Right.
It's basically you looking out for potential problems, check if there are problems, and then if there are problems, what do? You fix them. When it comes to stakeholders engagements and monitoring and evaluating of stakeholders engagements, you're looking out for the potential problems you're looking out for are basically issues and conflicts. Issues, conflicts. Those are the potential problems you're looking out for. So look out for potential problems means you're looking out for if there are issues and conflicts with any stakeholder. If yes, you check and verify if truly they are, then you go through the process of what? Fixing them. So if you look on our slides, we have a monitoring and control loop.
Correct.
That we go through in trying to resolve issues of monitoring and controlling our project. We say that the proper aspect of monitoring and controlling begins when you begin executing or implementing begin what? Assessing.
Right.
That's looking out for potential problems. You understand? So immediately you begin working and implementation, you begin looking out for issues.
Operational problems.
Yes, especially from stakeholders. What are their challenges? What are their issues? What is happening? Why are they fighting? So you begin trying to find out, does it exist?
Why are the deliveries coming in late?
Why are they coming in late?
Reports not coming as they
Why are
should?
the reports not exactly?
Why are there plenty variations?
Good. So you look out for every problems you can try to identify. And when we say problems, we are saying that, or issues, we are looking at, you will always have a benchmark in planning. Remember we went through stakeholder engagement. You always have a benchmark.
Correct.
So if you begin implementation and what you are implementing does not meet or deviates from the benchmark, then there's a possibility of an issue at stake. Mind you, it is not all the time that when you deviate, you are wrong. Sometimes during implementation, you might deviate, but you will be getting the results. So that's how can we say you look out for potential problems. Then you have to now check if it's indeed a problem. The checking means that you find out whether the result is given you conforms to the requirements or not. Because we are saying that on the field, what you write on paper might be different from when you go to the ground. You understand? But you might be able to deviate on the ground because of circumstances on the ground, but achieve or meet your requirements. So you have deviated. So deviations does not necessarily mean you are wrong. It is only wrong when you verify and it doesn't meet your requirements. But if you verify and the results of the deviation meets your requirements, then automatically you are right.
But what if it doesn't meet your financial budget?
So that is when change comes in.
Right. Okay. We'll get to that.
So that's what comes in. So I mean, you begin implementation based on your plan. So based on whatever requirements stakeholders have given you. So that's part of the plan. What their expectations are, what their needs are. When you begin implementation, you need to now begin looking out for potential problems. That looking out for potential problems simply means making sure that whatever you are achieving based on your implementation meets up whatever stakeholders, what the stakeholders have given you, what the expectations are, what their needs are exactly. If they actually meet up that, if your results of implementation equals your requirements by stakeholders, you continue your work. If it doesn't, then there is there's a possibility of a change. There's a possibility of what? A change. The change goes through a change control board, where it's a team, it's a group of people that has been set, usually chaired by the project manager, and includes the change owner. So that means that if there's an issue to be resolved, the person who brought about the issue becomes the owner of the issue. You are responsible for the issue. So the project manager, the issue, the sponsor, and then some selected few in terms of experts to form the change control board. So if there's a possibility of a change, meaning that whatever you're executing has issues, or stakeholders have issues with whatever you're doing, or stakeholders have problems, or think that there must be a change in whatever you're doing, then it must go through a change control board
Right.
for approval. What you'll be submitting to the change control board is a document we refer to as the change request. So the change request actually consists of it's a structure which has some elements on it. So the type of change you want to execute, the date of the change, when you want to resolve it, and then what is the impact of the issues at stake or the changes at stake to your schedule, your cost, and then your scope. What is the scope of work? What is the impact of the issues that you want to resolve?
Is that to determine whether it's worth the effort?
Good. It's determine whether it's worth the effort in terms of cost, because if there is going to be extra cost, there must be approvals. So those are the things that you must write down and justify on a change request. So that's why I say before, if you begin implementing and then whatever you're doing meets the requirements as stated by stakeholders, automatically you continue doing your work in peace. But if stakeholders have issues and changes with regards to whatever you are delivering, then that issues and changes need to be documented in the form of a change request. And the change request is submitted to the change control board. And the change control board will either approve or reject the change. If approved, it means you go back and begin implementing it. If rejected, they would give you other reasons why they rejected the change. Maybe they have other unique way of resolving the issue without necessarily going to redo the work. So they give you those reasons. You go back if it's not approved, and then you go and resolve it. You understand? So if you look at the slides on social on Facebook, you realize that I've created the monitoring and controlling loop that takes you through how you are going to monitor and evaluate stakeholders' engagement. So then what you must know is that the change request usually is documented and implemented in 4 different ways. All changes that you're going to document and submit to the change control board is documented and implemented in 4 different ways. 1, changes are documented and implemented in the form of a preventive action. So there's a change request which will be named, this is a preventive action change request, meaning that there might not be any issue at stake now, but you are anticipating that there might be issues or changes that needs to be done. So you put in measures to be able to prevent it from happening. That's the first one out of the 4. So it's called a preventive action. That's a form of change request. You understand? The second form of change request is a corrective action. Meaning that this time around, you've gone ahead, started the work.
The station has occurred.
The station it's in the process. You've started it, it's in the process. It's not completed. And you find out that there are issues that you need to resolve among stakeholders. So you put in a corrective action for you to be able to correct those issues at stake, and then you can move on. Then there is a change request which is also referred to as the defect repair. Okay. That kind of change request is documented and implemented on issues and changes that has already occurred. It's that you are not in the process. The issue has occurred. You can't do anything else.
It's post facto.
Yeah, exactly. So now you need to be able to repair the defect that has occurred, or the problem or the issue that has occurred. So that is.
So there's preemptive.
Then the corrective, preventive,
which is while in the process.
And then
there's a post facto, which is the defect repair.
Exactly. Then there's a final one, which is called the update. Those are changes that are made on project documents, on any document. If you think that the issue at stake is basically an issue of paperwork, then you have to do an update on the paperwork just so you resolve the issue. So the changes that are documented and implemented as a result of issues or conflicts that need to be resolved are basically documented and implemented in the form of a preventive action, a corrective action, a defect repair, and then finally an update. An update when it is changes or issues with regards to a document. So that's basically it. If you are able to submit the change request to the change control board, and the change control board approves the change request, then automatically it means that you should go and then implement the newly approved measures of resolving the issues or the changes. If it is not approved, then of course it means that there are other smart ways of doing it without going through the change process. And then sometimes the experts on the change control board would give you or advise you on the document as to how you can go about it without necessarily making changes. Remember, I talked about the fact that a typical change request document must have the type of change you want to embark on, whether it's a preventive, corrective, defect repair, and update. It must have the date, of course. It must also have the change owner, the person who actually originated the change.
Yeah.
Then it must show us the impact of the issues at stake or the changes at stake, to the impact of that to the cost, the implication on the schedule, and then the implication also on the scope of work, and even how it can affect quality and so on and so forth,
and even resource
requirements. So a proper change request shows you that, so that it tells you how much money you would need to resolve the change. It also tells you how much time you require for you to effect that issue or resolve that issue.
Yeah.
It also tells you how it's going to affect your deliverables, I mean the scope of work. What quantity of work in addition or subtraction will be made to your original scope of work. You understand? And then how it's going to affect quality and then resources. So the change request at least give you a very good picture of what it requires and how it's going to affect you positively or negatively on the project. At least that gives us an overview of how you can monitor and evaluate any process, including the stakeholder engagement process of a project. Remember, the principle of monitoring and controlling can be summarized into look, check, and fix. That's look out for potential problems. Check if they are problems, and then you do what? You fix them if they are actually problems.
What would you say to the statement that says, if the definition can be likened to the three words you just shared, look, check, and fix, then the process of monitoring and controlling or evaluation is one that is continuous from the beginning of the project to the end. It doesn't necessarily come in at the end, but it's a continuous thing.
I agree. You start monitoring immediately you start the project. You understand? Monitoring and evaluation, it's an ongoing process from the beginning of the project to the end. The only reason why we usually talk about implementation much when we are talking about monitoring and controlling is that majority of the work you use, majority of the resources, financial, human, and material resources required for every work, it happens during the implementation stage.
Correct.
So that's how come there is more emphasis of monitoring and controlling during that
That's
particular
the action stage.
That's the action stage. So that's how come there is more emphasis of monitoring and controlling during those particular stages, one way or the other. Now we can talk about, I want to go through the monitoring and controlling processes proper.
Let's do that.
We say that monitoring stakeholder relationship and managing their options and plans for engaging them is actually what the process is, the stakeholder engagement process. It's just you are monitoring them, they are monitoring the stakeholders and trying to look out for, resolve their issues, their conflicts, and then the options available, how to execute the other options, plan A, plan B available if they have issues and conflicts at stake. That is actually what one does during the monitor and evaluation stakeholder process. One may ask, what do I need to be able to go through the monitoring and evaluation process? I've given you an overview of what monitoring and evaluation is all about.
Yes, yeah.
Now, for you to be able to monitor and evaluate stakeholders properly, of course, you need your project management plan, which includes your stakeholder management plan. All the things that we went through last week, last 2 weeks and last 3 weeks are informations required for you, because you, of course, you need to know their requirements. You need to know their needs. You need to know their interests. If you want to monitor and evaluate them, all the requirements they've stated is actually what you would use to judge them.
Exactly.
Easily, because whatever you are doing on the project is to be able to meet those requirements with regards to stakeholders.
There should be agreed targets right from the beginning.
Exactly.
There should be a monitoring process. There should be a record of communication and all of that. There should be a reference point that you can always go back to.
Good. And you have created all those reference points through the stakeholder stakeholder engagement. We talked about it last 2 weeks too as well. The other thing you need is an issue log. It's a document that records all the issues that comes up from the beginning of the project. And then usually you have to make sure that you state the time those issues came up, and then the time you intend to resolve, and what is the status of the issue.
Right.
So it's a simple template that you could have or create by yourself to be able to log in every issue that comes. You need a work performance data. So basically it's information about each stakeholder with regards to their issues that is coming up, what is bringing about conflict, and then the work actually that is going on. You need a raw information about each of these things.
I'm smiling because I can see that, for example, in a construction project, this particular process of work performance data would be one that will be fraught with quite a bit of conflict, because then there's always a disagreement between, what's been done and what hasn't been done. And that's why we measure, isn't it?
Yeah, that's why we measure properly. That's why we measure. That's why I'm saying that you can monitor successfully if you have certain KPIs set during your plan.
Yeah.
So with stakeholders, we spoke about planned stakeholder engagement. So that planning process helps you set all your benchmarks for stakeholders.
Let me just shoot this quickly. What happens when you measure my deliverable and it's not there because person B didn't do this?
Yes.
I'm supposed to do cladding. I haven't done it because the form was not done by the contractor. And I'm the subcontractor for cladding. I haven't done it. When you measure, it's not there. But it's because it's somebody else's fault.
Somebody has to be able to do it. Yours is dependent on someone's work.
Then how do you measure my performance?
So you measure, of course, it hasn't been done. So that's at the end of the day.
It hasn't been done.
It hasn't been done.
Matter who.
It doesn't matter. So we are not talking about blaming. We are not talking about who is responsible for. Yes, and so we can say that yes, your performance, your work has not been done yet. It is not your fault. It is the fault of Mr. ABC. But you need to be proactive, because you have time as a person who is supposed to do the cladding. You need to also be proactive and be informing your project manager and other stakeholders, especially the person you report to, that look, I need to start cladding at this time. This man is delaying, and from what I'm seeing, I might miss my set date. I'm recording this for future conversations and reference. That's how we work.
Right.
So you start. So even this comment that you do or you give out or send across, you will let the project manager or your supervisor also go and give pressure to the person doing his bit that he's delaying. You understand? At the end of the day, it will be difficult for people to come and blame you.
True.
So that's it. So I was talking about what you require for proper monitoring and evaluating of stakeholder engagement. And I said that you need a project document, the project management plan. The project management plan contains the stakeholder management plan. In there, you have all the list of stakeholders. You have your stakeholder register. You have their requirements already, which is more like their KPIs. You have their expectations already, which is more like their KPIs proper. So whatever you're going to evaluate is against what they said they want. You understand? So that's basically it. So the work performance data, it's the raw information about what you have done as compared to what they said they want. So that's why I said, as part of the things you need for you to be able to evaluate proper, you need a work performance data.
Right.
It gives you the information of what has been done as compared to what stakeholder said he wants. The stakeholder said he or she wants a red gate. What has been done becomes the work performance data. The gate has been sprayed or painted. What is the color? Is it actually red or orange or pink? You compare. If it is red, it means you meet the stakeholders' requirements. You understand? So in evaluation, you pass. If it is not, that is where there is an issue.
Right.
Then maybe it is not. You check and say, someone comes and say, but I remember the stakeholder said it's supposed to be red. And it's like, no, this is not red. We couldn't get red paint and it's orange. But why? Why are you using orange? They said, so orange was actually part of our alternative analysis, our plan B, when we were developing a plan. And then all stakeholders aligned to it that if we are unable to get red in the market, we could use what? This. Then you pass to go. So the work performance data is the raw information of what you have done so far. Then you need your project documents. Your project documents at least gives you all the information about your project. When you are monitoring and evaluating, it's extremely important so that it becomes like a reference point.
Right.
If there's any disagreement here and there, one way or the other. For this, the technique used in managing this process is basically an expert judgment technique. That's why I remember we said you should be someone who has good interpersonal skills, someone who has good management skills, for you to be able to monitor and evaluate this particular process. At least also you must have a background of monitoring and evaluation that could guide you also in executing this particular process. There's loads of meetings that will be happening during this process. It means that you're going to be because they said it's engaging of stakeholders. You're monitoring their engagement in resolving issues, in resolving conflicts. Of course, there will be so much engagement that goes on. So there will be so much meeting. So one, I always say that you need an expert. Either it's you or someone who understands the monitoring and evaluation process proper. And not just that, but someone who has good interpersonal skills and someone who has good management skills. Because this time, you're not just doing the normal monitoring and evaluating of work. Yeah, doing monitoring and evaluating of people. That requires a special skill.
Some kind of skill.
Because even issues of tolerance, that's why interpersonal skills is there. Issues of tolerance and so on and so forth is extremely important when you are dealing with what? Stakeholders. At the end of the day, remember, whilst you are going through the monitoring and evaluation, based on the monitoring and evaluation loop I discussed at the beginning of this process, whilst you are going through the monitoring and evaluation loop, there's a possibility of certain outcomes or outputs. Yes, and one of the major outcome is the change request.
Hold that thought for me on change request. If you've just tuned in, this is Masterclass here on your superstation Joy 99.7. We'll take a quick message from our sponsors. When we come back, we get interactive.
Your favorite on-air business development program, Joy Business Masterclass, is in session, and you can interact with us on Facebook via the Joy 99.7 FM or Joy Business pages. If you tweet, the handle is at Joy 997 FM or at Joy Business GH. Don't forget to hashtag JB Masterclass. You can also call us on 0302 216541 or send your questions and contributions through to the WhatsApp number 0551 111997, and our facilitators will address your concerns. Attention everyone, class is in progress.
Welcome back. If you've just tuned in, this is Masterclass. We're here in the studio with Latif Abubakar, and today we end our conversation on stakeholder management. Phone lines are now open. Numbers to call 0302-216-541. That's 0302-216-541. You can also pick up that phone and give us a comment on 055-11-11997. If you're driving, please do not text while you drive, because we definitely want you to arrive alive. But otherwise, send us your comments on 055-11-11997. Pick up that phone and give us a call, 0302-216-541. If you have any motor vehicle of any kind, then Goyle has some great news for you. What do you do when you run out of fuel in your vehicle? Do you just stop anywhere? If that's what you do, then please don't do that any longer. Let us introduce you to the Good Energy family and why you must be a part of it. Goil Super XP Ron 95 and Diesel XPs are the best quality fuels with high performance in town for your vehicle. Goil Super XP Ron 95 is a high-grade fuel sold at the same price as normal fuel. Goil's Diesel XP is low in sulfur, making it an eco-friendly option for your vehicle. With over 440 stations across the nation, we ask that you join the family that rewards you with quality for an energized driving experience. Goil, good energy, Goil. Yenara. Yedia. I've got some comments on social media. I'll be taking them shortly. Phone lines are still open. Maybe Latif, very quickly. Do you want to?
Yeah, let me just conclude.
Round up on the process outputs.
Yeah.
And then we
Yeah.
go straight to the comments.
So I was saying that whilst going through the monitoring and evaluation process, whereby you're trying to engage stakeholders and manage the relationship you have with them, and make sure you satisfy them, there are certain outputs that you would get. One of the major outputs is called the work performance information. The work performance information is basically what you gather when you compare the actuals against what stakeholders required. So stakeholders give you a list of requirements. You understand? Now the project manager is executing with his team. The outcomes, when you are comparing the outcomes of the results you're getting with what the stakeholders told you they want or what their requirements and expectations are, the information you gather is what we call the work performance information. Right. That information might be that whatever you get, the actuals is the same as the requirements given to you as stakeholder, or the other way around. It might be that the outcomes or the actuals differ from what the stakeholders required or has stated in their original statement or plan. If it's the same, then you continue with your work. But if the outcomes differ from what was in the plan, automatically you go to the change request.
Right.
And remember, we told you how to develop, we gave you an idea of what a change request is. And then if you develop your change request, you submit the change request to what? The change control board. Right. That is where you go in for either approval or rejection based on the statistics on the change request in terms of the impact of the issue or the change on your schedule, your cost, your scope of work, and then resources, and sometimes one way or the other. So it's either rejected or approved. If it's approved, you go ahead and re-implement the work. If it is rejected, it means there are different ways of looking at the same problem without necessarily embarking on a change. So those are the outputs. The work performance information and then change requests are actually the results that one gets when you begin monitoring and evaluating stakeholders' engagement.
Brilliant. I've got some comments on social media. Let's go to them very quickly. This one is from Yvonne. Yvonne, you didn't say where you're reaching us out from. She says, how does one manage stakeholders on a project? I think she missed it when you talked about it. So maybe just very briefly, if you want to answer that. How does one manage
stakeholders? In summary, so in summary, you identify them. You try to identify stakeholders. And then you plan stakeholder engagement. That's the second thing. Then you, what's the name? Monitor. We talked about monitoring and evaluation of the stakeholder engagement, or you manage stakeholder engagement, then monitor and evaluate stakeholder engagement. Right. We went through those processes in detail, and then at least you can. The slides are there, I'm sure. Yeah. So you can go to the slides to find out the details.
I've got Ben from Klagon. Ben says, if I'm managing my wedding project, who are the stakeholders? Ben, congratulations, by the way.
So, obviously your wife is a key stakeholder. Your in-laws and then your parents are also stakeholders. The vendors are important stakeholders. I mean, those who produce your dresses and so on and so forth. And any other vendor you are going to engage.
And if you hold it in the church.
Yes,
of course.
The calendar of the church. Yes, so that the church, with the head, are also key stakeholders, because they would also influence the date that you want to have.
So those are some examples of stakeholders. Okay, I've got a few more comments. This one is Ibrahim from La Paz. Can you please go over how one can monitor and control stakeholders? This is Ibrahim from La Paz.
Yeah, so for monitoring and controlling, I always say that the simple way to monitor and evaluate, or monitor and control, is to look, check, and fix. Look out for potential problems. And here, when we talk about stakeholders, the problems you're looking out for is issues and changes and conflicts. So if you look out for those potential problems, check it. You don't just look and go and make a decision. You need to evaluate, check whether truly there are problems. If there are problems, you fix it. And then we said that you fix it through the change request. And the change request can be implemented in 4 different ways. It's either a preventive action, a corrective action, a defect repair, or an update.
Look, check,
and fix.
Ibrahim, I hope that answers your question. I've got Ben from Agege. Ben says, can you give us a pictorial view of an issue log and a change request? I suppose you can describe it.
Yeah, yes. So an issue log is just a document that you can prepare even on your laptop that must have a column. Of course, must have a column of all the list of issues. So you have the list of issues, and another column that has the dates that those issues occurred, another column that has the date you intend to resolve those issues, and another column that has the status. So that when you are resolving, you can tell us what is the status of that particular issue. So that's a very simple issue log.
Brilliant. Phone lines are still open. Numbers to call 0302216541, or you can continue to send us your comments on 05511119997. We've got a few more minutes on the show. We can pick up some more calls, 0302216541. We end our conversation today on stakeholder management, so surely there's 1 or 2 questions that you want to ask Latif while we have him here in the studio. Latif, I have a question. Is the work of the Change Control Board one that causes unnecessary bureaucracy sometimes?
No, I don't believe so. I don't believe so because, you see, if you are working as a project manager and with your team, sometimes you are very confident that if you don't have people checking whatever you do, you might end up doing the wrong things unknowingly. That is why even with the process of project management, we say that there are certain review parts that you must actually intentionally involve in your project. So you divide your project into let's say a number of milestones. Milestones that would focus on reviews. At
the end of each milestone.
At the end of each milestone. Just so you are able to at least identify certain changes or issues that needs to be identified at the early stage. Remember, the cost of changes are very high when you are progressing on the project. So if you don't keep doing reviews and getting people who would also audit you, your processes, you end up having changes that needs to be done at the latter part of the project.
And it's going to cost you more.
And it's going to cost you more. So it's extremely important.
What would you say is allowable percentage deviation from set targets during the monitoring process?
So before I answer that question, and mind you, as part of the change control board, you are there as a project manager. And then even the change owner or the issue owner is also there. So you can defend yourself why you wanted this particular change. So it's a very balanced group that help you. Now your question.
I'm smiling because I've had a personal experience with a change control board that was very difficult. But I suppose that things happen on projects and they're different.
Yes, of course. Oh, of course. There are people who also, of course, I've had scenarios where someone wants to frustrate you.
Exactly.
And it happens. It's up to you.
And what that does is it prolongs the time, and time translates into money.
So I keep telling people that even with that as a project manager, you must have timelines. And let the people sitting on the board know the implication of whatever they are doing with regards to the overall timeline of your work.
And the impact.
And the impact of it. And then how it's going to impact not just the time, but even the cost again of the project and the scope of work.
Okay. What is allowable percentage deviation from set targets during monitoring? Is there any industry standard?
Yes. So
2%, 3%, 5%?
People generally will say a 5 to 10%.
Okay.
Naturally, we calculate it.
Okay.
Yes. So, for instance, we expect that we have contingencies reserves, right?
That's correct.
So we say that even the contingency reserves are calculated as a result of the number of risks you've identified on your project. You are anticipated that certain risks would occur on your project.
That's correct.
What will be the cost of handling those risks if they occur on the project? You understand? That cost of risks is what we put aside. We work around it and put aside as contingency reserves. So always, as much as the reason why we use 5 to 10% is that per experience and standard, people have realized over the years that that is actually what is the amount of contingency required always. So it's become a norm and a standard. But naturally, you need to calculate it looking out for predicting the amount of changes that you think would occur on the project, and then identifying the number of risks and then the impact of those risks on your project.
I'm smiling again, Latif, because without stretching this too much, sometimes one risk can shut down the entire project.
Yeah.
And so on the budget side, the sponsor will say, listen, you can't come to me with 100% provision on contingency and say X, Y, Z, except that one risk can shut down the whole project.
Yeah.
You know, there are projects in Accra today which have been abandoned
A lot. Yeah.
because of litigation,
Yeah.
time,
Yeah.
things that went wrong.
Yeah.
So, yes, I think we'll stick to the industry recommendation, but it's for further discussion.
Yeah.
Right. Looking, fixing, and checking. When you say that the PM should do this, should he trust the operational process to do this, or must he do this himself?
He must trust the operational process, because you can't do things by yourself all the time.
Yeah.
You must make sure you have the right people. That's how come sometimes in project management we allow for the word expert judgment. You can even bring experts on board to help you. An expert is basically someone who has done that thing over and over, has done some work over and over and over, hence has loads of experience in managing that particular process. I think you must have the right team members who can also help you and take you through those particular processes easily. You cannot do everything by yourself.
At what point in the project do you change, let's say, vendors? For example, as a specific example.
Yeah. So, I mean, we have the procurement change request, and we have the procurement change control board too, as well. Here, the difference is that with the procurement change control board, it's different from the normal change control board, because that of the procurement change control board would have your suppliers as part of it in making decisions. At a point where you realize that, one, the vendor is not meeting your requirements, and your requirement this time might be your timeline requirements, might be your scope, descriptions of what he's supposed to deliver to as well, and then also your budget requirements. If you have agreed, because mostly you agree on these things with the vendor, if you realize the vendor is actually not meeting those requirements that you have agreed on, automatically you don't have a choice. You have to trigger, because remember, those requirements are not your sole responsibility. They're actually requirements from your stakeholders, and yours is to keep the gate and make sure that the vendor is able to meet or satisfy your stakeholders. So if the vendor is not doing so, you don't have a choice. You need to put in a change request and make sure it's either you correct whatever process it is, or you try as much as possible. So that's why I say you go through the process. First of all, there's a preventive measure. It can be a warning, so that it doesn't happen. You're anticipating that this vendor might make this mistake. Put in a preventive change request. You understand? If he still's okay and then he starts the work and you realize that no, you have to correct certain things, you put in a corrective change request until you decide that, hey, I can't work with you anymore.
Wow, so much information here. Latif Abubakar, share some thoughts with us on stakeholder management. What's our takeout, very briefly, if you will, from 4 weeks of conversation?
I think that it's how, basically the question is, how do I involve stakeholders on my project? That's what you should have. You should always remember. You involve stakeholders on your project, one, by identifying the stakeholders, determining their requirements, basically their needs, wants, and expectation. Find out their interests, their power, and their influence. Determining how you're going to communicate with the stakeholders and which tool you're going to use to communicate with them. How are you going to implement the communication or begin implementation of the communication plan? And remember always to monitor and evaluate your engagement process, because issues and conflicts are inevitable. They will always come up.
Issues and conflicts are inevitable. Maybe I want you to put out the number for Global Management Institute, just in case one of our listeners wants to reach out after the show. But before you do that, there's a quick comment on social media. Let me just see if I can sneak this in. Is there any software that can guide or aid us for this topic? I don't think the person added their name. It says Harrison. Oh, my good friend Harrison, friend of the show. He says there's MS projects or Primavera for project managers and AutoCAD for architects or designers. But is there any software for stakeholder management?
So, I mean, you can pick some of the templates, not software, some of the templates and dashboards from project management. And then, I mean, online, when you Google stakeholder management, they can give you some templates that will guide you. But I've not seen a complete software yet.
How do we reach the Globe Management Institute after today?
I think 0571 900 900. 0571 900 900. And then, I mean, for us, when it comes to project management training, and then the PMP exams prep class, of course, we are one of the best. We've been doing this for the past 12 years, and we've trained hundreds of people to pass the PMP exams.
Latif Abubakar, playwright and CEO of Globe Management Institute, sharing some thoughts with us on stakeholder management for the last 4 weeks. Thank you so much for joining us for today's show. God willing, we come your way with yet another exciting edition of Masterclass. We'll see you next week.